you had mentioned his name, and then that other journalist who came, she gave me his, this one, email, so we wrote it.
Okay, many people who recommend your name, sir. I wish I had a camera right now. That's a good smile,
Jarjum, will begin with your name.
Okay.
And tell us how you got such an interesting name and what does it mean?
My name is a combination of two syllables, of course, Jar and Jum. Jar is actually the last syllable of my father's name. And in our tribe, the Galos, we have this way of naming children, which starts with the last syllable of the father's name, and of course another syllable for the child. So the second part of my name, Jum, actually comes from Ojum, which is darling. And they say my father had more than a dozen brothers, but no sisters. So he actually was very keen to have his own daughter, and he had of course adopted lots of cousins, cousin sisters for his own. And then when he got married, he was looking forward to having a daughter, and unfortunately the first three were all sons. And then I think he told my mother that I want to marry another woman, because it seems like my own mother, you would not be bearing me any daughter. And so my mother was also, she tells us that, so she also told the father that, oh, take care, if the fourth child is not a daughter, then maybe you can get married. So probably my mother was also looking forward to having a daughter, so that the father doesn't bring another woman. And of course father was dying to have his own daughter, so probably that's how they gave me the name. So that's the darling.
Darling of the father?
Both. I think I saved my mother's marriage as well.
If your father wanted a girl so much, does it mean that in your tribe there is no son preference?
Now, our tribe actually is a patriarchal and patrilineal group of people, so there is very much son preference. In fact, they say if a family, if a couple doesn't have a son, the man has the prerogative to marry another woman so that he can, have a have a son who will carry on the family lineage. So there is son preference, but of course in my father's case, most probably because he never had a sister of his own, so he might have had that kind of yearning for a daughter.
Where were you born, and what was your father?
I was born in this place called Along. Actually, my father comes from a village. He was born in a place called Lagge, but that village, I think lots of children used to die, and so my grandfather had moved out to another place called Tego. So, but all the siblings were born and brought up in Along, which is the district headquarters of West Siang. Of course, those days it was undivided Siang, but now this is the district headquarters of West Siang. We call it Along on records, but people call it Alo.
And what was your father?
Oh, my father was a political interpreter. In Assamese, they used to call them Dubhashi. They still have those posts in the government. They were kind of, communicators for the administration and the people. So people who could speak more than one language.
They were like translators?
Yeah, they were interpreters, political interpreters, so translators.
So they interpreted like court cases and other things?
Yeah, they used to, in our days, when we were small children, they used to even do arbitration, negotiations, yeah, and even quite a few, criminal cases also I think they did. But civil cases, of course, they used to dispose. And
what were the other interests of your father? I'm asking because he brought you all up so differently.
He actually takes it with a pinch of salt, but I tell him, we basically grew up under our mother's shadow rather than the father's. Like, although it's a patriarchal system, he was hardly around when we were growing up. Of course, he used to come on annual holidays, vacations, to stay with us during our school breaks and all. And he was known for his sporting spirit, and he was known and very good hunter, known as a hunter also. And there are a few other talents he had. Of course, the best I remember is how he used to teach us about looking at problems from different aspects, perspectives. Once he was, peeling a supari, tamul, and like, the skin was, this long thread, he just kept kind of, drawing it out, and it became a long one, and he said, can you jump over it? So all of us as children, like, we jumped across the rope, and then he said, okay, lengthwise you try, and we couldn't do it. So he said, never look at problems from just one side, like, those kind of small things he used to, like, he was a good father, I think.
Jarjum, tell us about your mother and how did she marry your father?
My mother actually comes from, she's also from the Galo tribe, but there's we have different sub-tribes. So my father, he belongs to this sub-tribe called the Karkas. And my mother belongs to the sub-tribe called the Pugo. So actually their marriage was, I believe, one of the very interesting episodes of their time, history kind of. There's some educated people say it was much better than Romeo and Juliet.
Really?
Actually, my mother was given in marriage when she was still a very young child, and then when she grew up, she didn't want to get married to that man. She realized, although the family was well off, rich, and well-known family, but the man she was supposed to be married to was really not very up to mark. Not exactly a dud or a fool, but not very smart either. So she didn't want to, live with that man. So she negotiated and finally convinced her father-in-law that if you would expect me to live in this village with one of your nephews or someone, do you think you would be happy as my father-in-law, who would have expected me to be your own daughter-in-law? And since you also agree that I can't live with your son, I cannot be forced to stay with someone else. So it seems he actually lobbied with her own father-in-law, and then finally she got kind of relieved from that marriage, and then she was undergoing some trainings in weaving and a little basic schooling in Pasighat. Pasighat is the present district headquarters of East Siang, and it is also the first place where actually schooling came in, and we also have the first college, the Jawaharlal Nehru College, in that place. Of course, this was in the early 50s. So then, since my mother's name is Gamde, she's in fact an Ete, her maiden name is Gamde Ete, the tribe the clan into which I am also married in. And my father, his name is Sokjar Gamling. So my father, as a government employee, he used to travel. So I think that's where they met, in Pasighat. And theirs is a love marriage. And because this was also the first marriage between a Pugo, the Pugo sub-tribe, and the Karka, both of which actually were warring, sub-tribes of the same tribe. So people had lots of problems accepting that marriage. But finally,
so it was really one of those intertribal marriages.
Yeah, we could call it. Now it's a very commonplace for these people from these sub-tribes to marry each other, but theirs was the first one, and socially there was so much of reluctance and in fact resistance from my uncles and many other influential people of the place.
Is the age a factor in marriage, like an older woman can marry a younger person? And
Initially, I was personally under the impression that it is always an elder man who marries a younger woman. But of late, I realized that those days also, even elder women had married younger men.
That is,
Most probably because of some kind of compatibility, or it was accepted. Of course, even if it is an elder man who marries a younger woman or vice versa, the man most of the time ends up having more than one wife. So maybe it doesn't make much of difference to them.
And where did you study, and can you tell me about your educational background?
I had my schooling at hometown. Started at a nursery school. It used to be called the Nehru Memorial English School. And from there I was shifted to the Ramakrishna Mission School, run by, of course, the RK Mission, Marthan Mission. That's all in along. And normally the Ramakrishna missions, they actually have only boys' school. But the one in our place, they had co-education, where of course girls had non-residential schooling. And of course, after I did my matriculation, I got married, and after marriage I did my pre-university and graduation from the Itanagar College, which actually used to be a night college affiliated with the Punjab University in the early 80s. Because of the Assam agitation being on the peak those days, so the only place here, it was affiliated to Punjab University. And then after a gap of about 7 years, I joined the university just to have an experience of how a university feels like. So I did my master's in English literature.
And you managed to do all this with 4 children?
Yeah, in fact, I have had 5 children. Unfortunately, my second child didn't survive 2 months old when he died, and we didn't know what exactly happened. It was a sudden kind of a thing. And actually, in fact, when I was in my 10th standard, my mother's cousin sister, she and her husband, they actually came to ask for my hands, and then my parents actually took it lightly. Then later on, when they thought it was serious, they talked to me, and I said, nothing doing. I'm not interested in getting married. I want to study and all. But again, there was lots of family pressure. Like, they said it's within the family. You can't say no on the face. So give your justification. So on the day when the boy was brought, so I said, I have no intentions of getting married, because right now I want to at least do my graduation. That's a priority. And I'm interested in academics. And then my would-be husband, he actually was already working as a lecturer in Assam Engineering College. So he said, of course, in our community there are not many educated girls, and if someone is interested about studies, one should really go for it. And then he had a rider. Of course, if you are really keen about studies, you can, even if we are married also, you can continue. On that note, the dialogue was over, and then I realized the next morning everyone said I was engaged to him. Actually, I didn't know that was an engagement talk. But finally, after my board exams were over, and I had gone down to Bombay for my school excursion, and when I came back, I was told that I was going to got married the next week. And then I got married. And when my board exams came out after the marriage, I had good marks, and then I negotiated, and of course he stood by his words. So every time I was pregnant, I was writing a paper, and in-laws used to laugh like, okay, so every child is writing your exam. And then finally I graduated. And later on, of course, after my post-graduation, when I wanted to do my PhD, he was laughing at me. Yeah, I remember I had promised for continued education, but I didn't realize it was going to be a lifelong education. So But he has been good. In fact, still remember when I was writing my exams, he used to babysit in the staff room, like, bottle feeding the baby. And he also underwent lots of social pressure from his peers, like, people who used to come and tell him, okay, fine, as a man, why do you need to let your wife, go for night classes and all? If you have decided to help her out, then you suffer, like, you babysit. And lots of societal pressures were on him also, but he stood by me. And I'm happy that he did that.
You studied in English medium and you also speak very good Hindi. And does the Galo tribe itself have a language? Does it have a script?
Actually, Galos, we have a very rich, dialect, but we really don't have our own script. Many of us prefer to use Roman script, and otherwise, some people, write in use the Devanagari also, but neither of the scripts actually help us to kind of really, write our own dialect properly. But we have a group called the Galo Welfare Society. One wing of it is now working on evolving a script for the Galos.
Do you speak that language at home, or you speak English and Hindi basically?
It depends on which generation and which place you are in. And especially for group meetings and all, where we have to deal with the Galo women, and that too from the rural background. So we have to use the language. And of course our language again, the dialect that we have is, there are two types. One is the day-to-day language that we speak for communication, but then there is this a more refined kind of language the elders use for public speaking. Mm-hmm. And then there is the more religious, ritualistic language, which I do understand, but I can't speak.
Is there any rich literature, like folk literature they have? Is there a tribal literature with myths and legends and available in that language?
Yeah, in fact, my husband's younger uncle, paternal uncle, he is a folklorist. Uh-huh. And there are some younger generation people also now engaging in folk literature. In fact, we have very rich folklores and folk songs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this bit of our cultural life actually not much has been done, and that's still a very virgin field for our younger generation to work on. And unfortunately, the elder generation people are fading out very fast.
So do you know any folk song?
Not exactly, not exactly.
I was about to make you sing one song.
Not folk songs. We used to learn, like, where other, taught when we were very small, but I don't think I can recollect it and sing it right now. Maybe in a more conducive place, like a fireplace or something, like, in the evenings with a little drink. Delhi वगैरह में तो room rent for offices, it has been enhanced to 250 rupees per night. So that's okay so long as you provide. Let's see. अभी शायद ऑफिसर लोग एक गेस्ट हाउस में दे दीजिए, एक सर्किट हाउस में दे दीजिए प्लीज ना. थैंक यू सो मच मिस्टर. फिल्म का नाम क्या बोला था?
Jarjum, from what you say, there are many tribes in Arunachal Pradesh, and did they have different religious practices, and was there an influence of other religions?
I think there has been influences. Of course, we have more than 25 major groups and as many as 100 plus minor tribes and sub-tribes. And each one, of course, have their own unique practices, ritual-wise, even belief-wise. They have their own faith systems. And the people who have been in touch with the Ahoms or the people from the plains of Assam, they have a tendency to kind of practicing Vaishnavism and in some cases Shaivism also. And there are two tribes in the eastern Arunachal, the Khamtis and the Singphos, who practice Hinayana Buddhism, akin to the ones practiced in Thailand and Sri Lanka. And then we also have the Mahayana Buddhists in western Arunachal, among the Monpas and the Sherdukpins. And in between we have the group of people who call themselves the descendants of the first men, Abotani. And this group also have their, again, within their own groups, they have their own practices. But ever since the missionaries have come in, both Christians and Hindu missionaries, we have lots of proselytization by the churches, and also an effort of organizing the indigenous groups to resist further proselytization. And this is basically being organized by the frontal groups of the Sangh Parivar. There are different banners, different organizations, so-called social organizations of the Sangh Parivars. There are influences, of course.
And also resistances.
It's actually, if you had time, you could have met some more people, but what's also happening is actually there were efforts to Hinduize the tribal population in many groups. But unfortunately, because of our food habits, our own unique cultures, which is so different from the Hindu fold, and especially among the educated people, people who are aware of the Varna system of Hindu groups, and they say even if we become Hindus, we cannot be among the higher castes. So at the most, maybe Shudras, and who wants to be a Shudra? Whereas we are, very proud people as ourselves. So that way, Hinduization couldn't take roots,
Yeah.
But again, there are people who have been perhaps to some extent benefited by their proximity with the groups. We know a few cases at least. And
The question of cow slaughter is also a big thing, isn't it?
yeah. In fact, I've been waiting for the day when the state would sometimes say, cow slaughter is banned in the country and you can't do it in Arunachal, and how the people would, rise to the occasion. It's not possible to ban it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but lots of people are, changing food habits in terms of maybe people are becoming health conscious, and they are starting to compare food habits and how vegetarianism can be better than veg, and and how, in fact, interesting things like comments like, okay, the Muslims are, hot-blooded basically because they eat cow meat and all, beef and all. So those kind of things go on, and lots of elites are associated with both Christianization and also the pro-Hindu activities.
Also, animal sacrifice is a big part of your ritual. Like
course.
the Mithun sacrifice
Of course.
is one of the major things.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different kind of approach to life.
Very true.
What is the position of girls' education in your tribe, Jarjum?
My tribe is, in fact, that way, I think we are in a better position, female literacy-wise. 1991 census supposedly said we had 46% of female literacy in my group of tribe, we Galo females. And I think the statistics is still 2001 also says we are much better.
So there is, girls have been encouraged to study.
Yeah, administration always have, in fact, ever since we were small children, we learned that girls' education was being encouraged. I remember there was not one single girl in my community, in my colony, who didn't go to school. Those days, in the early 60s and late 60s. And even now, they say all children must go to school. But of course, back home in the villages, young girls, most of them cannot really continue school education because many of them are withdrawn by mothers who have a brood of younger children to be taken care of. And many girls drop out from school because the priority is the home front. And for economic reasons also, young girls do drop out if the family kind of says you cannot support all the children. And if the son or the brother has to go for higher education, that becomes the priority. And I know of many young girls who have discontinued their own higher education or even senior school education, taken a little job and supported brothers who have gone into professional courses and all those. So that kind of prioritization in the society for boys' higher education also has pushed back the girls to some extent. General literacy has gone up among the girls, but again, they are not qualified enough to compete in the job market, or especially for better jobs.
Was there a woman in your mother's class who rose very high and who was later on in politics?
Yeah, she was, I think, junior to my mother. That you are talking about Mrs. Omem Moyong Dewe.
Yes,
yes. She was, I think, junior to my mother in school. She graduated from Shillong, and then, of course, she became the Rajya Sabha MP from her state. And she even now is one of the invitees on the Congress Working Committee. And she had headed the Arunachal Pradesh Congress Committee also. So, yeah, first generation educated woman with there.
What about child marriages? Can you tell us about it? What are your own early memories of it?
In fact, these people who are supposedly the descendants of Abotani, the Tani group have lots of problems about child marriages. In fact, my tribe also, we used to have lots of victims of child marriages, and finally, if the girl grew up and said, no, I'm not getting married to this man or something like that, and they used to force her to, be taken to the in-laws. Even brothers and uncles and fathers, they used to drag the girl back and, deliver her to the in-laws' doorsteps. And I still remember it because my father was one of those political interpreters with whom usually those, girls who kind of, came to the administration seeking help and all those were kept in custody with the political interpreters' families. And I remember one day, actually, when I was in the kindergarten, while coming back home, I had a little mishap on the road. A bicyclist hit me. And my father had taken me to the hospital for first aid, and then on the way back, because it was kindergarten school, perhaps it was the morning hours, so instead of taking me home, because he had to attend to his council meeting, so he had taken me to the council hall, we call the Kabang Ghor. Ghor is Assamese for house, Kabang is of course our council. Then I realized they were having a meeting about one of the girls who was at that time staying with us, for some time. And I had grown fond of that, girl. And then I heard them say, like, she has to be taken away, and the girl was crying, shouting for help and saying, no, I don't want to go. And then I saw them dragging, and then I remember I had picked up some pebbles and I was throwing at those people who were dragging her away. And that was a real kind of, touching scene. I still can visualize. It's as fresh as the same day. After all these years, maybe about 35, 36 years, I can still very vividly, remember it. And even today, of course, in my tribe, it has gone down very drastically. We don't have child marriages happening right now. Although we get to hear about a few stray cases where it's, very educated, well-placed people, doing this. And they have perhaps taken care that the girl is at least not forced into it. But there's another group, the majority group, in fact, called the Nishis. That this is basically in central belt of Arunachal, and they still are continuing to do this. And many people, of course, say that they have stopped practicing child marriage. But recently, we are on tour to one of the districts called Kurungkume, and one activist there, one young girl from Nagaland who is working for an NGO in that pocket, she mentioned that a 2.5 years old girl was recently married off. So that is the scenario, and it is one of our major concerns because many young girls are being taken out of school to be forced into marriage and that kind.
And women don't have property rights also?
Property right, immovable properties, no.
Like land?
No, no land, no houses. But of course, when it comes to government land, influential families, their women, their daughters are having access to government land. In fact, so much so that because there is no land selling act in the state, people with influential people with many wives, each of their wives are getting land, government land. Mm. And many maybe poor men might not also be getting access to government land. And movable property, parents who have their own traditional riches, they do part with lots of jewelry and artifacts, antiques. Those are normally given to daughters.
During marriage?
During marriage. And actually the traditional marriage goes on till the woman is dead. It starts with the engagement ceremony and then ends till she is dead. There is so much of lena, dena. Yeah, it's more of
it's a
exchange.
Continuous process of giving.
Yeah.
Jarjum, I think your days of activism began when you threw stones at those people when you were just a kid. When did you join the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society, and what were your activities initially?
I actually joined the organization in May 1985. That happened accidentally because I was part of a women's cultural group of my own group, and since I was also actively involved with the festivals of our, organizing festivals, especially my own community. We have this Mopin festival. It's agriculture festival just before the beginning of the agriculture season in the month of April first week to be exact, 5th of April we have this. And that year, like by the end of the festival, our group realized we had more than 4,000 rupees, contributed by well-wishers and hosts and hostesses. So we didn't know how to use the money, and different ideas were tried, but we said, okay, finally we all agreed to organize a get-together and spend the money. And fortunately or unfortunately, everyone who were invited to the little party, again they pulled into our kitty, and we had much more than what we actually were trying to spend by organizing that little party. And then Mrs. Lomte Riba, who is actually the founder secretary of the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society, she is also one of the forerunners of our tribes women. and her husband was a senior director in the state government those days. And she said, well, we have this organization called the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society, which was registered in 1981, founded in 79, but registered in 81. And that has been lying defunct because all the founder members had to go out of Itanagar on transfer with their spouses, and that has been lying defunct. So maybe if the women agree, we could revive this organization by putting this money in. And all of us agreed, and everyone who was around, they also supported and also even encouraged, saying, our tribe has always been known to be the forerunner in the state, and why not? Why can't the women from this group help in reviving the organization? And that's how we pulled in the money, and the organization was revived, and they inducted me as their chief auditor to keep books and all. But besides keeping books, I was the woman Friday in the group. I used to drive my general secretary up and down Itanagar and Naharlagan to on my scooter. I used to ride a Bajaj scooter those days. And ever since then, I have been with the organization as a voluntary worker. In fact, we still don't have paid staffers. All of us are volunteers. A couple of full-time volunteers, and others are part-time volunteers. And it is a membership-based organization. And we have been perhaps able to mobilize some sections of the women today. Looking back, like.
20 also doing some business of your own?
Yeah. In fact, I actually learned, dealing with money, especially from my childhood days. My mother used to be a very good agriculture producer. She's a peasant woman, and she used to have all those seasonal vegetables and fruits. So I used to organize her marketing when I was still in school. And see, because all my elder brothers used to be in boarding schools, so I was the eldest at home, and my father was hardly ever there. And when I got married, actually my husband, because he's the eldest in the family, he took over the education of one of his cousin brothers and his youngest brother. And then his salary, we realized, was not enough to support all of us. So my uncle also, my husband's uncle rather, the one who got me engaged and married to my husband, he had this space in Itanagar. He was a former legislator, so he had some land. He said, why don't you start something? And suggested that printing business is a respectable one, so even a woman won't have any problem, running the business. And then I had lots of supportive structures with me, basically because my former secretary of the school, Swami Gautamanandji, he used to visit us whenever he came down to Itanagar. And then when I told him that I need to do some business, he took me to the officer in charge of the Small Industry Service Institute, SISI Itanagar. Those days it used to be one gentleman called Ranjit Singh. He was a Sardarji. He was willing to help. Then I got to talk to the banker in the State Bank of India, Mr. J.K. Sarkar, Jeevan Kumar Sarkar. So everyone said, okay, we'll help. So I started the printing unit. It was a letterpress thing. Now it's quite antiquated, but that was also the first private printing unit in Itanagar. So we had the government press, but it was not accessible to the public. So I started getting into that. And so I was busy with those, trying to make a little more money to substantiate what my husband was earning to support the family.
But didn't you also run a Chinese restaurant?
That was after I joined the organization.
Achha.
It was part of the growth of the business. Yeah, we realized we didn't have a good place to eat out, to take out families, and on weekends if someone wanted to go out. And in fact, I had this very lofty, idea about thinking people coming together. It's something like those, in Bengal they have those addas.
Yes.
So I thought it would be kind of an adda where people could take out families, and also, some friends could like to sit around a table and talk about things, basically share thoughts and ideas, concerns. But I think I might have been a bit too early for the place. I realized more than what I actually thought would happen. I realized the school children in uniforms, they were bunking classes and spending time in the restaurant. And sometime later I also got to know that very responsible people were coming with, I initially thought, okay, friends are coming for tea and all. Later I learned some cases people were having affairs and they were using my place to spend time. And ultimate was like, those days actually bar licenses were not given. We didn't have a excise act in place in the state. And even those days, drinking in public spaces was not allowed. So police officers, the district administration senior officers, they used to bring their own booze and drink it in my restaurant during my absence, of course. I never saw anything happening during my presence. And one day actually I was told by my manager, who was a lady, she said actually the police had raided our place. I said, for what? And they were looking for booze. But I said, we don't keep booze, so why do they do that? Then I was told actually these people, the officers who came for the raid, some of them actually used to bring their own booze and drink in our place. So I went to the district administration and I said, nothing doing. You either give me a bar license or tell your officers, it's not done. But people like us, we get implicated. I am also an activist. Apart from making money, honest money out of my business, I'm also a responsible person. So you either give me a bar license or maybe you talk to your officers. I know because my people say that your officers are involved, so they cannot implicate me. So those kind of situations. And finally, when I got into activism more and more, I realized these units where we have liquid cash exchanges, without your own personal presence, you run into loss. And then I decided to wind up.
इसका ड्राफ्ट ड्राफ्ट इज नॉट हियर ना केजी 23rd महीना This one is with टेलीफोन बिल ऐसा करो इसको या लोगों को थोड़ा 2-3 फोटोकॉपी करके ना एक फाइल इसका नाम से एक फाइल खोल के रख देना 2-3 सेट फोटोकॉपी करना ओके ini enggak kata letterhead dulu ना जो करना था कि we have asked for these things उसको थोड़ा provide करके इसे printing कर देगा IPR पेपर में थोड़ा ज़्यादा दे सकता है
Jarjum, can you tell us something about the Kebong, what a Kebong is, and what was the Vikas Kebong movement all about, and how far were you involved in that movement?
Kebang actually is the word for a council among the Adis. Of course, the 1950 schedule list of the tribes in the Constitution of India actually doesn't have it, but the people who are listed as Abors in the schedule list actually call themselves the Adis. And Kebang is a Adi word. And it used to be actually normally, you know, a council of elders, village elders, wise people, of course sans women, wise women were not there. And so later on the state administration, they started incorporating these village councils into their system of administration. And this Vikas Kebang actually was started by Sanjoy Ghosh. We had represented NGO representatives from all the states of Northeast, and we had some discussions about how to involve people in the process of development initiated by the government, and how the marginalized rural people, especially the women, can participate and become partners of development. And since you know, the Kebang doesn't have women traditionally on its councils, we said the Vikas Kebang would be a different kind of a council. It will have women, like, you know. So people like us joined, and those days I was the Secretary General of the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society. It was in mid-90s, and we had started participating in training programs, capacity building, and in between, those days, the Awad Any, the organization through which Sanjoy and his team was working.
It was the Association of Volunteers.
Association of Volunteers for Rural Development, Awad Northeast. So they were based in Jorhat, and they were working very actively in Majuli Islands, the largest riverine island. So, and perhaps the initiatives of the NGOs in involving the marginalized people got into the way of the vested interest groups, and that's how we look at it when a very soft-spoken, very kind-hearted soul like Sanjoy was picked up. And even today, it is a debate if he's alive or he was killed by Alpha. So those kind of things, and it kind of pushed back the whole movement, and that's it. But of course, after Sanjay was picked up and his whereabouts were not known, and in fact on the demand of the Alpa, the Awad Ani was disbanded and they moved out. Today his friends and partners, they are all over Northeast working in different capacities from different forums, and they are doing very good works. And his dream of Vikas Kebang had not happened, but we continue to work in different ways.
Are there women in Kebangs now?
In the traditional cabans?
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, what we did was also the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society, the organization that I've been working with. In 1994, we started mobilizing the state network. And my home district, West Siang, it was also one of the places where we didn't have women on the councils. So the coming of the APWWS network in that district headquarters, women started intervening in cases, especially where a victim or an appellant was a woman. And there are lots of initial resistances by the system, especially the patriarchs of the councils. But finally today, every woman-related case, the district administration sends for the participation of APWW's representative. So, and in many other communities, women have started participating in councils, although unofficially, but their presence is very much there. But of course, there are other tribes where it's not happening yet. But things are moving since mid-90s.
Jarjum, what exactly was the mandate of APWWS?
APWWS, as per its objectives in the bylaws, it says it will work for the uplift of the status of women in Arunachal Pradesh.
That is its mandate.
Yeah, so we have to do everything possible and legally allowed, I think, to achieve that.
It's also been involved with some fact-finding, research, and some public campaigning on some issues. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, fact findings, especially when there has been cases of atrocities against women, single or more than one. We have tried to send teams to do independent fact findings, because many times we get controversial reports and there are hardly any redressals in cases where such things happen, actually finally which end up in political debates. Mm-hmm. So we have tried and sent independent teams. And campaigns we have been doing since the beginning. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I had joined in 1985. Prior to that, they had done some works with adult literacy of adult women. Mm-hmm. and vocational trainings. And then when it comes to public campaign, ever since we joined, we have done public meetings and campaigns on political education of voters, basically on democratic rights of citizens and the importance of electoral franchise exercises, and of course very much against child marriages, forced marriages, polygamy, on land rights of women, and of course the customary laws versus women's rights. And we also have been to some extent engaged in the debate of development, how it's happening. And many people have been saying, and many of our own colleagues in the movement, they have been saying why women should talk about education and literacy and health, or why about big dams and all. But we have tried to kind of educate ourselves also in the process of working on different issues. It's not just customary laws that affect the women. When we are talking about the status of women and upholding their rights, or kind of upgrading their status in the society, we try to look at the problems from a very holistic point, and we cannot compartmentalize what is women's issues and what is not. So that way the organization has evolved quite I think far now, and today many of our colleagues are happy that we are engaged in different debates of development and our own society. And now they say women are not just women in a corner of the world, but they are part of the larger world. And so the mandate has been enlarged. There is kind of a visual enlargement also, apart from, of course, the mental horizons being broadened.
Your organization also took a stand on anti-liquor laws. And it was quite controversial at that time, isn't it?
Yeah, we tried to. One, we said initially actually till about the late 80s, we didn't have a liquor policy in the state. So it was almost like a dry state, although of course drinks used to be smuggled and brought into the state from Assam, and people used to buy at exorbitant prices. But since we have our traditional drinks, home brews, and which was also available in the local markets, when the state government wanted to introduce the excise policy, we tried to organize the women brewers. Unfortunately, they thought we are against the local brews, and of course the government, we tried to say, like, it would be a wise idea to do a kind of balancing between how much resources, revenues you want to generate, and also look at what kind of impacts it will have on the people's health. But the government pushed through the thing, and of course we didn't have a space for political debates those days, because our priorities were immediate women's rights. And in fact, we tried to look at this also as women's rights to home brews. If they can do it in a more hygienic way, why can't the state promote it? Of course, today under tourism, development programs, the government says, yes, we are trying to promote local brews, of course, but there's almost a gap of 20 years, 10, 20 years, yeah.
There was also some criticism of these women using battery acids and other
Yes,
things.
that was one problem where actually we said the women, if they want to continue brewing and putting liquor on the market, they have to do it under sanitized, controlled, hygienic situations. And unfortunately, the women whom we wanted to help, they got the wrong message and they didn't participate in our discussions. And so we couldn't push through our political agenda of intervening in the government's excise policy making.
Jarjum development policies for women, like women's empowerment through self-help groups or microcredit programs and other things. What are your views on that?
Perhaps if a government has formulated such policies, it must be on the basis of experiences, good experiences they have had in other places. And in Arunachal also, SHGs and microfinance things are happening in small ways, not very big, especially through the DRDAs. Unfortunately, in my own village, rather my husband's village, I realized when the groups were formed, the person who was behind the formation of the group perhaps didn't orient the women. So in the process, the village people, they have been divided vertically into two groups. People who have benefited from the DRDA program and others who haven't. And then from other places, the experience has been like these SHGs are being promoted by the people in power. It's not like the government program for everyone who is in need of it, but it's a government program which will benefit only the people from the party which voted the party to power. So that kind of division has come into the society. Unfortunately, as tribal societies, we have lots of community values, where collectivity is the essence. Like even if you go to the farms, it has to be a collective work most of the time. And if you are building a house also, it is a collective work of the whole village. But unfortunately, SHGs, they have been seen to divide the women. And I don't blame the policy, but the way the policies are implemented, the agencies are not sensitized in terms of their own personal orientations about how to organize the women, how to teach them, how to help them. The hand-holding techniques, they also don't seem to know. And then also they themselves are perhaps not capacitated to execute these programs. So perhaps we need more capacity building of the deliverers themselves.
You have some very strong views on legalization of prostitution. Can you share them with us?
Sure. Actually, those days in the early 80s, when I was starting to do my printing, unit. So since I had taken loan from the bank, I used to work, very hard overtime, into early hours of the night, morning rather. And those days, I used to be so mobile, and because I was one of the maybe the night animals in the township. I also got to know that prostitution is happening, and then of course after joining the APWWS, we used to discuss about how tribal women are getting into prostitution, which is not a tribal activity. It might be the oldest profession on earth, but the prostitution is a commercial exercise and activity, and which was totally alien. So we used to discuss about it. And towards the later part of the 80s, we once did a follow-up on a case, and the police people said, okay, we are the dragnet is coming closer, we are kind of zooming in the person, the pimp, and any day he would be now arrested. So we're very anxiously waiting for the day when this pimp would be booked. Unfortunately, no news. Later, when I talked to the police officer, a senior police officer, he said, no, actually we had to call off the whole exercise because the government said that Arunachal is a tribal state, so we cannot extend the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. And there is no prostitution happening here. And that was a big dilemma, and since we are fighting on many other issues vis-a-vis women's rights and their status, so this had to take a backseat. But since early 90s, ever since we started hearing about AIDS epidemic coming into India and all those, so we said nothing doing, women are likely to get exposed because they would be the worst sufferer. Because one, they don't have access to information, two, they don't have control over themselves, their reproductive selves, and three, with this kind of rampant prostitution going on, you can't keep a tab on who's doing what. So we started debating on this, and then we also realized people don't want to talk about it because maybe they think it's below their dignity to talk about prostitution, even if many might be indulging it in it themselves, but it has not reached the public platform as a matter of concern. Now, in 1993, we talked about it, and since then I have been saying, okay, if the state says we cannot extend Immoral Traffic Prevention Act in Arunachal, maybe if the girls, if the women are having no problem about putting themselves up on the market as sex workers, and if the men in our society are not ashamed of paying for the sexual services that are provided, maybe the state should better benefit by legalizing it. One. Two, legalization of prostitution perhaps may be a better option for people who are sitting home, basically the housewives who are sitting ducks for STD infections, STI, RTI, everything, and of course HIV. So we said at least if there is a red light, a proper licensed worker, and where the government can keep a tab on their health, and also if we can monitor who's coming and who's not, and that may be safer, at least for the society at large. Of course, this big debate is going on all over the world, especially in the feminist movement, the women's movement. Now, for people who opt for prostitution as a source of sustaining life or as a livelihood, it is their right to work. But we also have to look at things, situations where women are dragged into it, women are coerced into it, women are forced into getting into prostitution or to work as prostitutes. There are trafficking of young children, young girls, and even like ignorant, illiterate women. So I am, as an individual, as a woman myself, I feel it is a shame that a woman is compelled to become a prostitute to earn her bread and butter. But again, if in situations where people don't want to take prostitution as a degrading profession, but as something which is an alternate to everyone's life and lifestyles, so maybe the state should look at it seriously. But many people think I am very radical. My whole agenda, very frankly, is to bring this debate into the public space, because as a tribal society, Arunachal is like invariably everyone, old and young, educated, illiterate, men, women, everyone, they proudly say we are a tribal society, like it doesn't happen in our society. But very frankly, very candidly speaking, it is happening. Lots of young girls, lots of married women, unfortunately, are into prostitution, and it is high time we talked about it in public. And at least if there is an effort or some attempt to legalize, or some kind of official procedure is initiated, maybe people would talk about it and would like to do some retrospection or introspection and say, okay, let's not do it, or let's stop it. And that's my agenda. In fact, from the commission, I have requested my member secretary to write to the government a letter from the commission to provide for a forum where we can debate about this.
Jarjum, even the National Commission on Women is considered an organization without any teeth. You are currently the chairperson of the State Commission on Women. What concrete policies do you think you'll be able to bring about?
One, of course, the Constitution has lots of provisions for ensuring the equality of both men and women in society, and which actually has not been happening in my state. So right now, rather than the teeth and claws, our commission would look at our weightage, how much weight we can kind of put on the government to ensure the implementation of the existing policies, especially to ensure the rights of the women. And of course, when we talk about the teeth that the commissions are not having, I believe it's not just the legal provisions, but how you negotiate with the system or the people who are dealing with the things. If we can convince, and convincing is something an individual can do kind of, when you are interacting or when you are personally convinced, it is easier and perhaps possible to convince the other person to, ensure that the person sees it your way. And that's a difficult thing, but not impossible again. And so far, as our commission is concerned, as of now, it's taking time because we are the first batch. And in fact, we were constituted in January 2005, but we got this office only in September. 1st of September it was inaugurated, and I got the telephone some 2 weeks back. And till then we didn't even have a typewriter. So things are actually structurally it's taking time, but officially again, right now we have a very supportive government. At least whenever we say, okay, this is something is happening, they stand by us, especially the district administration. Most of them, they say, okay, fine, what is it that we can do? So more than the need for teeth and claws, I personally believe it's about the ability of the members on the commission or people who are interested in women's empowerment and their rights protection to be able to convince, sensitize, and network with the people who matter, especially the administrators, the bureaucrats, and especially with the enactment of policies like the Domestic Violence Act and the one which is shortly coming up, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment in Workplaces, these should be our teeth and clues, and not necessarily the Commission's own act itself. And in place like Arunachal, where all these years customary laws have prevailed over constitutional provisions, the enactment of the Women Commission Act itself in the State Assembly, it kind of gives the sense to people that okay, the political structure, the leadership is also keen about giving women their legal space. So I feel it's more about motivations and becoming sensitized.
Jarjum, you were also saying that Arunachalis get very irritated when they are mistaken for Nepalis. It happened to one of your girls.
Yeah. Actually, it keeps happening with most of, I think, Arunachalis, men, women, young boys, or all men, everyone. Very interesting events like even us, when we are walking, especially on the streets of maybe Delhi, especially. Calcutta is, I think, used to the slit eyes, chinky eyes.
Yeah.
Delhi, Bombay, the metros, they say, they just start speaking Kanchi, something like that, those little words they know about Nepalis. One of our girls, she was traveling with friends in Rajasthan near the Indo-Pak border. So it seems one of the BSF Jawans said, show your passport, you are not an Indian. So she said, of course, I'm an Indian from Northeast, I'm from Arunachal Pradesh. And the Jawan unfortunately didn't know where Arunachal is. And he said, but you don't look like an Indian. So she said, of course, if you say that to me, I would also say, you don't look like an Indian. You could be a Pakistani, spy, working on our side of the country. So those kinds of things keep happening. But hopefully, most probably, things are changing a little bit, especially in Delhi, with lots of Northeast people being there.
Yeah.
So,
I was talking to this girl in your office who belongs to the Mishi tribe.
mm-hmm.
And she said that some of her tribe people said that how can we become Hindus? We eat the gods they worship.
Yeah. That's what they say कि हिंदू लोग तो गाय को पूजते हैं, हम लोग तो गाय को खाते हैं, तो हम इनके भगवान को खाते हैं, तो हम कैसे हिंदू हो सकते हैं? So,
Yeah.
those are there.
That thing is there definitely.
Actually, I really don't understand. When we talk about the education policy of India, Government of India, CBSE and NCRT, our children, we seem to be knowing more about the geography of the country, more about the people of the different states of India, whereas other places, even the educated people, administrators, business people, also people who are in better positions in life, they also don't seem to be aware of the diversities that's all over the country.
Yeah, because the entire Northeast is taken as one block of region,
Yeah.
whereas it is so different.
That's the most unfortunate part.
Yeah.
For that matter, when people say, so what is Arunachal about? And then I have to keep thinking, okay, where do I start? From the east or the west? Which tribe do I start from?
Yeah.
The diversity is too much.
Yeah, within Arunachal and within Northeast, the diversity
Yeah,
is so
yeah.
much.
And it's a very big place geographically also.
Yeah, it is.
And politically, geopolitically very far removed from the mainland.
Yeah. Jarjum, you have very consciously associated yourself with larger organizations like the Indian Association for Women's Studies. How has it helped in your evolution as an activist, as a feminist?
I believe every association, or for that matter, any interaction with someone who's from a different background has always kind of enriched understanding and given a perspective to your maybe experiences or your even thoughts. And my association with the Indian Association of Women's Studies and my stint as joint secretary in the IAWS for 1 year with the doyens of the Indian women's movement and feminist movements, it has of course given me those insights into especially the discourse on feminism, at least a kind of philosophical, theoretical understanding of what all this feminism is about. Because for me, I actually, as I mentioned earlier also, I got into activism per chance, and my association in the Arunachal Pradesh Women's Welfare Society was an accident. Of course, the instinct to come to the defense of girls or women who need support, the empathy has always been there, but maybe we are doing things without much awareness about what's happening elsewhere, and so my time spent with the feminists of India has added to my understanding, and perhaps that's why I'm sitting with you here today being recorded.
You've also gone outside India. Did you attend the Beijing conference? What was your experience?
I was in the NGO forum during the Beijing conference at Huairou. And in fact, our organization was accredited to the UN that year for the Beijing conference. And the best part was that it's something like आज तक मैंने समझा था कि मैं अकेली पागल हूँ, तो बहुत सारे पागलों के बीच में और मज़ा आया. So, like in small places like Arunachal, you feel at times you are the only one who is so concerned, but when you realize there are other friends, other like-minded people all over the world, it gives you that kind of energy, the strength to go on, to move on, and also to survive the kind of pressures at times, especially as human rights defenders or even as women's activists. Now, of course, it has gained a bit of acceptance, but those days it was quite different. And Beijing especially gave me the exposure to the best part that I learned from my Beijing experience about the sexuality of women, because this is something I had personally not had time to give a thought about. But sharing platforms with the lesbians, the prostitutes, those kind of insights which I never had. So I went to the tents and tried to understand, and it added to my life and its quality, perhaps.
Yeah, like meeting these women, actual women.
Meeting them and listening to them, how they feel, because we grow up with our own little mores and values, and there is so much of conventionalism in whatever setup you grow up in. So I had my own limitations, because I have lived in this society for so long, and prostitution is something which was totally alien, and lesbianism is something we may be knowing or hearing about like a very distant story somewhere else, but that's also the reality which never was discussed earlier. But today when we hear about the larger debates on sexuality and all those, at least I feel comfortable, unlike my friends perhaps who didn't get those exposures. And I have come to accept things as they are, like, you know, there are differences and there are different people with different values.
You have also been to Pakistan. Did you go as part of a delegation? What was your experience?
Yes, it was as part of a delegation. We have this group called the National Alliance of Women, which actually came together as a post-Beijing follow-up group from all over India, smaller organizations which formed the alliance. And one of our agenda, of course, is apart from following up the platform for action document of the UN commitments made by Government of India, we have also been doing campaigns on violence and poverty. So we have this international movement going on against poverty and violence. It's called the World March of Women, and we had the charter going around the world. So when the charter reached India, we had to deliver it in Pakistan, to hand over to the partners in Pakistan. So that was as part of our delegation that I went. And our group was supposed to have gone across to Lahore, from Wagah into Lahore and then to Karachi. But there was some problem, so I came back from Lahore. I didn't go to Karachi. But the best part was the common people actually want peace across the border. And then we also realized small people don't have big says in big issues, and that was some kind of helplessness people felt. But otherwise, at least since this was my first trip across to Pakistan, I realized, and of course everyone said so, there is not much cultural differences also between North India and that part of Pakistan. And in fact, we had good seminar and also some cultural programs, exchanges of songs. And it was a very good experience, because otherwise the media tells us only about the wars and the pickets and bomb blasts and how people are taken for underground training, militancy and all those. But there is possibility of love and peace and friendship across the borders.
In your set of photographs, I saw a photograph of yours with Clinton. How did that happen?
Okay. I also don't know how it happened. But I got this call from the American Embassy in Delhi, and they said Mr. Clinton is coming to India, and we are inviting some young generation people to have an interaction with him in Bombay, and we want you to come and meet him. Then I had some problems, because as part of the Indian people's movement and especially women's movement, we had lots of problems about the American policies, especially vis-a-vis globalization and all those. So I said, I'm not sure if I would like to come down and meet him. I said, I'll get back to you. And they won't rest till I said yes. And then I shared with my friends from all over. I sought advices, counsels from friends and well-wishers. And there were two lines of thought. People said, no, protest, don't go. And some other very wise people, the most sagacious among the lot, they said, no, but Jarjum, this is also an opportunity to put forward our thoughts through you. So let's take the opportunity. And
In fact, many in Arunachal said, my God, world's most powerful man, and they are inviting you to see him, talk to him, and you are not accepting the invitation. That's not possible. So finally, I was also convinced to make the best use of it, and I accepted. That was his last trip to India as the US president. And I got to meet him, listen to him, and share a few thoughts. In fact, I even put forward a written memorandum as Secretary of the National Alliance of Women. And we're only 7 of us. Of course, others are very high profile young people, but I also really don't know where I got in from. But I was there. And he came out to be a very charismatic, of course, Clinton's charisma is well renowned. And then the best part I liked about him was his ability to draw out, people. He made us all feel so comfortable. Like, it was not as if we were talking to the most powerful man on earth, something like that, And his keenness seemed very genuine, very sincere kind of expressions, body language, and even words. And that was very appreciative. Unlike most of our Indian leaders, that was a big contrast, like, I have seen some of India's top people, listen to them in meetings, seen them personally, like from maybe about 6-7 feet distance. But except Madhavraj India, not many have been impressive.
Jarjum, I know that you need a fireside to sing, but since you've spoken about love and peace and all that, can you give us a song? It'd be nice to end this with a song.
What kind of a song?
Any song that you like.
Actually, the time of the day is actually not really conducive to a romantic song. Lomaga asuptana opopi mudula mola dumda pagro elani kuma jalag damro si dunya la piso terem kate kula kota hatam terem kate kula piso pimu dukur tadaku nali komjengo Pado pauma hujur kate kula Pado gagup silona gubata daku Dumda pagro elani kuma jalag damro si Dunya la Juna galawata usakambaye Lona gakarnata karsakambaye Karbo gajimi jamanatasi ubajiye lapa Aji gazgasasigi holu gasago holo gasinam sigi holu gaigo Dumda pagro
ma jala gedam rosi Dunya nyela